Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got week 24 of our power ranking series. We've got another week of power rankings here. Lots of intriguing things happened. The top part of the power rankings stayed pretty much the same, but there was some changes in the top 10, including some more players coming in and going out of the power rankings with all of the changes that came out after this week coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. It really does help my channel. So like we said, we've got another power rankings video to talk about. In today's video, we're doing week 24 of power rankings series, and we are nearly done with the power rankings, at least for the regular season. I'll hopefully do this into the playoffs too, but regular season power rankings only got a couple of weeks left. So we got week 24. There was a little bit of a change up in the honorable mentions. There was a tiny bit of change up in the bottom half of the top 10. The top end of the top 10 stayed mostly the same, so we'll get to all the updates here. So we'll start off as we usually do, talking about the 4 honorable mentions. So the 4th honorable mention is a team who's coming back in after they were out for a couple of weeks, and that's Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens, after what was a really sour stretch, I think they lost like what, 4 or 5 in a row. They've been really good, including winning all 4 games they played this week. They went 4-0-0. They started the week narrow 3-2 victory over Florida, which was very, very impressive. Then they were able to easily take down Boston, barely got by the Philadelphia Flyers before ending the week against the Nashville Predators and with another win. So they're really good. Like, they're scoring a lot of goals. The defense, especially goaltending, is doing really great for them. So this team's clicking right now. They've gotten themselves comfortably into the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference, and they're looking pretty good offensively. Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Dvorak, Gallagher all produced really well offensively this week for the Canadiens. Defensively, Lane Hudson, who continues to make his case for the Calder, Matheson, and Savard doing pretty good defensively, and in net, once again, Montembeault and Dobbs have given them dang good goaltending. So all in all, a solid week there from the Canadiens. They are my 4th honorable mention. 3rd honorable mention this week, and same as last week, is the New Jersey Devils. The Devils only had one game this week. It was against New York Rangers and shut them out 4-0. So they've been having a really back and forth last couple of weeks. So to see them win the one game they had this week was pretty good. Like I said, they're doing really good. They're still 3rd in the Metro Division. I think they're nearing a playoff spot now. So really good stuff there from New Jersey. Like I said, they only got the one game. So like in that game, Heischer, Palat, Meyer, Cotter, and Halla doing pretty good offensively. Defensively, guys like Hughes, Nemec, and Pesci doing pretty good defensively. And in net, Markstrom did pretty good in that one game that they got the shutout in. So all in all, solid week there from the Devils, going 1-0-0, and they stay as my 3rd honorable mention. My 2nd honorable mention this week is a team who was 1st honorable mention last week, who dropped 1 spot, not because of anything they did this week, but because of other teams ahead of them, and that is the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers, who are still 3rd in the Pacific Division, still falling a little bit farther out, had a decent week this week. They went 2-2-0, started out the week with a very impressive 3-2 victory over the Vegas Golden Knights, and then took down the San Jose Sharks 3-2, so back-to-back 3-2 victories, but that was followed up with a loss in a pivotal game to the Los Angeles Kings 3-0, and then they finished out the week with a 3-2 loss to the Anaheim Ducks. So once again, they play all 3 California teams, play the Knights, beat the Knights, which was impressive, but they did lose to LA. That was a costly loss to Anaheim. So like I said, they went 2-2-0 this week. They're still 3rd in the Pacific. They're starting to fall a little bit farther out for home ice advantage in the playoffs, so still, it's not overly great, but they are a really good team. They were still able to produce really well this week, and even their goaltending wasn't overly bad. Like offensively, Skinner, Podkolzin, Brown, Janmark, Henrique all did really good offensively. Defensively, could have done a little bit better, but still. Bouchard, Emberson, and Wallman doing pretty good defensively, and in net, Skinner and Picard did all right, but they didn't do great. So interesting note there, but the Oilers went 2-2-0. They're still 3rd in the Pacific, and they're 2nd in my honorable mentions this week. And my 1st honorable mention is a team who is really heating up at the right time and closing in on their first playoff berth in a very long time, and that is my Ottawa Senators. My 2nd favorite team, who I've been hoping to get into the playoffs for quite a bit of time now, had a solid week last week. They went 3-1-0, just like last week. Started out the week with a loss to the Buffalo Sabres, this time 5-2. Was not an overly great start to the week, but finished strong. They were able to take down Tampa 2-1, Florida 3-0, and on the second half of back-to-back beat Columbus 4-0. So back-to-back shutouts. This team is clicking at the right time, and I don't even think they really need to do much to make the playoffs anymore. I think they need like 2 wins in the last 5 games. So all in all, Ottawa is doing great. They had a fantastic week. Their offense was clicking, except for that one game against Buffalo. Their defense was sound. So all in all, Ottawa, who's now in the first wildcard position and looking really good. I'm putting it as my first honorable mention offensively. Stützle, Tkachuk, Batherson, Giroux, and Perron doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, Sanderson, Chabot, and Clevin doing pretty good defensively. And in net, Allmark and Forsberg, who both had a show this week, were stellar in net. So all in all, Sens first honorable mention after what was a fantastic week, and they're still in the first wildcard position. So those are my 4 honorable mentions. Now going over to the top 10 power rankings for this week. So at the 10th spot in my power rankings this week is a team who was a little bit higher last week, but I bumped down just 1 spot. They still had a very fantastic week, going 2-1-1, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning had a decent week this week, going 2-1-1. Started out the week with another impressive victory over the New York Islanders. Then they fell to the Ottawa Senators, like we just talked about, in very narrow fashion, 2-1. Then they were able to take down the New York Rangers before they ended the week with a shootout loss to the Buffalo Sabres. So like I said, wasn't fantastic, but they got 5 out of possible 8 points. They got 2 out of possible 4 wins. Like, you take that if you're Tampa. They're still very much in the hunt for top spot in the Atlantic Division. They're only 2 points back of Toronto, I think, for first in the Atlantic. So this team's doing really good. Like I said, it wasn't fantastic, but they got a lot of goals this week, and their defense held their own. So a pretty solid week there from Tampa. Offensively, Kucherov, Point, Gensel, Goncalves, Bjorkstrand doing really good offensively. Defensively, Hedman, Perbix, Chernak doing pretty good defensively this weekend, and at Vasilevsky, as per usual, did quite all right, even though they did wind up losing that 1 game. So interesting note there, but it was a solid week there for the Tampa Bay Lightning, going 2-1-1, and that is why I have them as my 10th team in my power rankings. 9th team in my power rankings this week, and entering for maybe the first time all season, is a team who has been heating up at the right time, and that is the St. Louis Blues. The Blues are clicking. They went 3-1-0 this week. They did wind up having their win streak end at the end of the week, but still, they were fantastic. Started out the week with a very narrow overtime victory over Detroit, then had a very narrow 5-4 overtime victory over Pittsburgh. They were able to take down Colorado 5-4 in regulation before they had their win streak end against the league-leading Winnipeg Jets. So Jets are a really good team. They were on a really good run, so you'd expect them to wind up losing 1 game, but still, this team's up to a 43-29-7 record. They're in the first wildcard position. I don't think they'll have enough juice to catch Colorado, but still, this team came from nowhere. They had a 12-game winning streak. They deserve to be in the top 10 with the way they're playing right now. Offensively, this team is clicking. Shen, Buchnevich, Thomas, Kyrou, and Texier are doing pretty good offensively. Defensively, Fowler, Falk, and Broberg doing pretty good defensively, and in net, Binnington and Hofer have both given them pretty good goaltending. So all in all, the Blues team's clicking, and even though they had their winning streak end, and bumping them into my 9th spot in my power rankings. 8th spot in my power rankings this week is the Carolina Hurricanes. Fell a little bit from last week. They were one of the only teams to have a losing record. They went 1-2-0. Started out the week with a very impressive 5-1 victory over Washington before they wound up losing back-to-back games to end the week to Detroit and the extremely bad Boston Bruins. So they still have a 46-26-4 record. They still clinched a playoff spot. They're still one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and second team in the Metro Division. So I'm not going to bump them down too much. I think 8th is a pretty good spot for Carolina, but still, after a losing record, I am going to bump them down a little bit. Offensively, team was clicking this week. Svechnikov, Nosen, Aho, Jarvis, and Martinook doing really good offensively. Defensively, with guys like Burns, Chatfield, and Orlov doing pretty good defensively. And in net, Anderson and Kochakov, while they didn't do fantastic, did all right this week. So interesting note there, but Carolina went 1-2-0, losing record, drops them to 8th in my power rankings. 7th in my power rankings this week is the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avalanche were another team who had a pretty decent week. They went 2-1-0. Started out the week with a very impressive victory over Chicago, 3-2 in a shootout. Then they were able to absolutely obliterate the Blue Jackets, and it was a must-win game for the Jackets, 7-3, before, like we talked about, losing narrow fashion to St. Louis 4-5. So like I said, this team's still in very much control of being a top 3 team in the Central. I very much doubt that they'll be able to catch a Dallas or a Winnipeg, so it looks like they're probably going to be in the 3rd slot in the Central Division and have to go to either Winnipeg or Dallas in a first-round series. But still, this team's clicking. They're a team who I think not very many teams want to face when it comes to playoff time, so that's a really good team. They have a 47-27-4 record, and I think they're still doing pretty good, which is why I had them as my 7th team in my power rankings. Offensively, McKinnon, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, Coyle, Nelson doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, with guys like Makar, Taves and Manson doing pretty good defensively. And in net, both Blackwood and Wedgwood continue to give them pretty good goaltending. So all in all, a solid week there from the Avalanche. That's why they are 7th in my power rankings. 6th in my power rankings this week is the Los Angeles Kings. They had a really good week this week. They went 3-1-0. They started out the week with a very big win over Utah 4-2. Then surprisingly took down the best team in the league in Winnipeg 4-1. Then they were able to take down the Edmonton Oilers that we talked about 3-0 before having their win streak end against the Seattle Kraken. So it wasn't a great end to the week, but winning 3 out of possible 4 games, 6 out of possible 8 points. You like to see if you're LA. They're still in contention for top spot in the Pacific Division. Right now they are second. They have a record of 44-24-9, so do not count them out for being a top team in the Pacific Division, but still, this team's clicking all cylinders and they're finding their game at the right time. Offensively, Fiala, Byfield, Deneau, Laferriere, Kopitar doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, Doughty, Spence, and Clark doing really good defensively. And in net, both Kemper and Riddick have done all right. So all in all, solid week there from the Kings. That is why they are 6th in my power rankings. 5th in my power rankings this week is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Only had 2 games this week, won both of them. Started the week with a victory over the Florida Panthers. I think it was like 3-2 or something like that. And then he took down the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-0. So 2 impressive wins. Narrow one against one of their Atlantic rivals. Dominant one against the Jackets. So they're up to a 47-25-4 record. Still hold the top spot in the Atlantic Division. This Maple Leafs team looks a whole bunch different than some of the last years, and they may actually finally win the Atlantic Division. So that's why I'm bumping them up to 5th in my power rankings. Offensively, Matthews, Marner, Nyes, Lawton, Kampf doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, Carlo, Oliver, Ekman-Larsson, and Tanev doing really good defensively. And in net, Woll and Stolarz are still a really great goaltending tandem for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So all in all, solid week there from the Leafs. That's why they are 5th in my power rankings. 4th in my power rankings this week is the East leaders in the Washington Capitals. The Capitals had a decent week this week. They went 2-2-0. They started out the week with a very narrow victory over the Boston Bruins 4-3. Then they lost to Carolina Hurricanes in embarrassing fashion 5-1. Then they took down Chicago Blackhawks in a very narrow fashion 5-3. Then they ended the week with a sour note when it comes to the game results, as they lost 4-1 to the Islanders, but a really good milestone for Alex Ovechkin as he became the highest goal scorer in league history, hitting 895 career goals, surpassing Wayne Gretzky, the great one. So all in all, it was a very good end to the week when Ovechkin hit that milestone, even though the result wasn't there. But they had a decent week this week. They went 2-2-0 for a possible 8 points. They're still in a very fantastic position. They could easily clinch the Eastern Conference this week. So I think that the Capitals are pretty happy. They're now only 1 win away from 50 on the year. So with a 49-19-9 record, they are still doing pretty good. Offensively, like we just talked about, Ovechkin hits the milestone. He's up to 42 goals as a 39-year-old. That's insane. You also got Strome, Dubois, McMichael, and Protas, who are doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, Trevor and Riemsdyk, Chychrun, and Sandin are doing really good defensively. And in net, Thompson and Lindgren continue to be a lethal duo in net. So all in all, solid week there from the Caps. They are 4th in my power rankings. 3rd in my power rankings this week is the Pacific Division leaders, and that is the Vegas Golden Knights. The Knights, once again, just the Caps, had an average week. That's why I'm keeping them where they were last week. They wound up going 2-2-0. They started the week with a very narrow loss to Edmonton, like we talked about, 3-2. Then they got shut out 4-0 by the Winnipeg Jets before ending the week on a back-to-back, being the Flames 3-2 in overtime and the Vancouver Canucks 3-2. So it wasn't a very fantastic start to the week, losing to 2 really good teams in Edmonton and Winnipeg, but it was a very fantastic end to the week to salvage going 500 this week and going 2-2-0. They've been able to pull a little bit ahead of LA still, and there's still a couple of points ahead of them. So even though LA is breathing down their backs, they still have a tiny bit of separation, and they do have the tie breaks. So Vegas is still well on their way to probably getting another Pacific Division title. Offensively, teams clicking. Eichel, Olofsson, Hurdle, Smith, and Carlson doing all really good this week. Defensively, guys like Pietrangelo, Whitecloud, and Hannafin doing really good defensively. And in net, Hill and Samsonov have done well in net. So all in all, solid week there from the Vegas Golden Knights. That is why I have them as my 3rd team in my power rankings. 2nd team in my power rankings this week is the Winnipeg Jets. Just like the other 2 teams, they had a very decent week this week. They went to 2, and they started out the week with a very narrow loss to the Los Angeles Kings 4-1, then took down Vegas, then they lost to Utah in a very narrow fashion before, like we talked about, they wound up being St. Louis. So all in all, Jets went 2-2-0, that 53-21-4 record, 53 wins is absolutely fantastic. They're keeping ahead of the Dallas Stars right now, so all in all, keeping them at second after what they did this week is pretty simple. This team's still clicking though offensively. Connor, Shifley, Iafallo, Ehlers, and Perfetti doing really good offensively this week. Defensively, Shen as well as Morrissey and Pionk did pretty good defensively, and in net, both Hellbeck mostly, but also Comrie have done really good in net this week. So all in all, solid week there from the Jets, scoring 500, and that is why they're staying number 2, and the team who's staying number 1, same as last week, is another team who went 500 this week, and that is the Dallas Stars. The Stars went 1-1-1 this week. They started out the week with a very big win over the Nashville Predators, then they lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins before losing in overtime to Minnesota 3-2. So you don't want to see them lose against Pittsburgh. There was a very late loss that weren't able to get a point, but still they had a decent week. They're up to 50 wins, 50-22-5 record, still chugging for trying to catch Winnipeg for top spot in the Western Conference in the league. So they're still in a really good position, and this team's clicking offensively. Duchesne, Robertson, Hintz, Granlund, and Rantanen doing really good offensively. Defensively with guys like Liabushkin, Dumba, and Ceci doing pretty good defensively. And in net, both Onger and the Smith have given them some very fantastic goaltending. So all in all, a solid week there from the Dallas Stars, and that is why they are my top team for the second straight week in my power rankings. Definitely, that's all the power rankings updates for week 24. We only saw one team this week go in and out, so just want to mention that. The Montreal Canadiens, who were out last week, are now my 4th honorable mention. The Florida Panthers, who were actually 10th in my power rankings last week, are now out of my power rankings. So that's the only switch we made from last week, but here's my top 10 power rankings for week 24. So the 10th spot you have Tampa, the 9th spot St. Louis, the 8th spot's Carolina, the 7th spot's Colorado, the 6th spot's LA, the 5th spot is Toronto, the 4th spot's Washington, the 3rd spot's Vegas, the 2nd spot's Winnipeg, and my number 1 team for the second straight week is the Dallas Stars. So definitely, I'll let you guys thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. Did they put anyone too high? Did they put anyone too low? And if you had to do power rankings as it sits right now, I'd love to hear your guys thoughts on where you would put each team. Definitely let your guys thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and for legend, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this without you guys. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below, and don't forget to leave a comment. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. Definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.